So thank you so much for turning up and choosing the webinar instead of sunshine. It means a lot to me, so I would love to make the most of it and give you as much value as possible, and probably that is going to happen at the end. So we talk about the 4 stages of growth or decline. What is that exactly and why we are talking about growth? One of the reasons is that plateau is a myth. Plateau doesn't really exist. Because of the compound effect, we just don't notice if we are growing or we are declining. So it's nice to say that I'm in the comfort zone, I'm just having a rest, but if you don't use something, then you lose it. And it's easy not to notice the differences. And that's the reason why we're focusing on growth itself. But what do you need to grow? Have you seen this picture anywhere recently on social media?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And what did you hear about this? What was the story?
There are lots of stories about it, a lot of stories, but it's kind of it's about leadership, and it's about the way how your environment and culture is. Because without the culture and environment, you can't get anywhere. I mean, you can't give context to the picture. So, yeah.
Any other insights, something like leadership lessons?
I think, if I'm correct, good morning, this is Rima. If I'm correct, the leader is supposedly in the back and making sure that the weak ones are moving along, but that was at least one story anyway.
Yeah. To be honest, that is the most popular one, and this picture went viral, and a lot of people added some leadership insights, and we can learn from nature, and it's good. But according to Yuval Noah Harari, the best stories need to be good, not true. And this is one of those stories. So it has nothing to do with reality, because the story is that is the leader at the end, so nobody is left behind. And then you have the 3 weakest ones on the front, the strongest ones behind them, and then the average wolves in the middle, and again, the strong ones, the real soldiers. So according to the International Wolf Center, that's not true at all, because this is the most difficult part, the first 3, because it consumes most of the energy, and that's the most dangerous one. So definitely they cannot be the weakest wolves. And the last one, probably that's the guy who got lost or just got distracted. It doesn't mean that's the leader. So it's a really good story, and that's why it's alive, but it doesn't mean that it's true. One of those things is the fixed mindset and growth mindset. The topic itself is real. Yes, it exists. But what is that exactly? So growth mindset is the belief that you can learn from your mistakes, you can be better tomorrow than today, and that's why you put the work into everything, which is great. You have to have it. But according to Carol Dweck, most people talk about the false growth mindset, that you just praise the effort over progress. And that's when you hear the words like, at least you tried it. Well, not really, because practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. And then if you practice the wrong thing, you can get really good at it. But the other question is, does it really work? How much can you develop it? How much can you teach it? One of the biggest researches was in Australia. 12,000 students participated in 65 schools, and they trained the teachers, they had online courses, and they just wanted to understand how much they improved. And it's really easy to measure the progress there. And the result was that, well, not much. There was only a tiny segment where they had a tiny improvement, and that was the struggling students. They benefited from it. The other ones, not so much. So thinking positive is not the same as growth mindset. And it's good if you think positive and you learn from your mistakes. And if you have growth mindset, it's fantastic. How much you can develop it, how much you can improve it and teach it, that's a very different story. But it's a good one. So today, we talk about what is the one most important ingredient of growth? What are the 2 barriers to making it happen? What are the 3 invisible forces that make or break a team? And the 4 stages of growth, or technically decline. Jacob Morgan asked 140 top CEOs and 14,000 employees one question: what we should be teaching leaders now to prepare for the future? It doesn't get more practical than that. And he came up with 4 mindsets and 5 skills. I changed the names a little bit based on his definition to make it a bit more descriptive. But the 4 mindsets were growth mindset, teamwork, inclusion, and global mindset. In terms of the skills, coaching, innovation, communication, self-awareness, and also technology. As you can see, 8 out of the 9 skills and mindsets are directly linked to how much you understand yourself and others. People skills are not optional, they are power skills. And it's not based on common sense and good intention. This is something that we need to learn. If you don't understand yourself, you don't understand other people, then you are not going to be in business for too long, more than likely. So what is the first barrier? Common sense. The famous golden rule. Treat people the way you want to be treated. Which sounds really nice from an ethical perspective, don't be rude and all those things. But if you try to lead and serve people based on what you like, what you need, what you are scared of, then it's going to backfire majestically. Because common sense is when somebody thinks like you, and this is what we like. People who think like us, those are the smart people. Those are the people with common sense. And that's normal, that's what we prefer. But in real life, it doesn't really work. So, for example, according to research, 60 to 80% of all problems in a company happen for 3 reasons. Clash of personalities, poor leadership, and clashing values. 60 to 80, that's a lot. Not because people are not good enough, it's because they clash. So, for example, if I mention any researches, I mention any number, and you want the original research, I can send it to you. So I'm not going to say anything because it sounds good. We have all the original researches. And because people rely on the golden rule, common sense and good intention, it creates a mindset gap, and it can be really expensive. For example, 86% of leaders see themselves as inspiring, all confident people. But according to a McKinsey report, 82% of employees think they're not. So you're not blaming anyone. People do their best based on what they know. Intention is good, impact might not be. 80% of CEOs believe that their customer service is outstanding. Of course, usually that is the projection of their own preferences, common sense. But according to Salesforce, because they have the data, only 8% of customers agree with them. That's not good. And also, 91% of those people are not going to say anything. They just go somewhere else where they feel valued and understood. Because let's be honest, your clients and your employees have plenty of options. Or $46 billion are globally invested in leadership training every single year. Is it a good investment? I don't know. It increased productivity by 2% only. It's really expensive. So we keep doing the same thing, expecting different results. That's not ideal. Or 50 to 70% of executives fail within 18 months of taking on the role. Or nearly 2/3 of CEOs don't get any coaching, and even the ones who do, they're not really happy with it. It's all about people skills, but they're not getting them. So what is the second barrier? Well, 95% of companies buy and sell outdated solutions. So think about it. You go to the shop and you want to buy the latest MacBook, and you pay a fortune, and this is what you get. Unless you're a collector, you're not going to be happy because you would feel cheated. But this is what happens in the training industry. Because most of the companies buy and sell solutions created in the 60s and 70s based on the answers of people who were working without EU, internet, and cheap flights. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the world is changing rapidly. And new challenges require new solutions. And this is not just theory. Look at the employee engagement numbers for the last 20 years in the US. Companies spend billions and billions on the same solutions, new packaging, old content, but the numbers are not really improving. That is the definition of insanity, but probably they never zoom out a little bit just to see if it's working or it's not. Just because something is familiar or popular, it doesn't mean that it's still up to date. And the results speak for themselves. To make it even more interesting, 85% of the jobs that will exist in 2030 haven't been invented yet. The future is not the same as it used to be. But we know one thing, people skills are going to be even more important. So we have to make that decision now. If we are going to use technology or technology is going to use us. The difference is going to be in the level of people skills. That's how important it is. It's not nice to have power skills. And to be honest, I made the same mistake. And I thought that, just being smart and kind of qualified would be enough to be successful, and that's not true. So that good-looking guy on the picture is me with my brother. I grew up in a small village in Hungary, and because I didn't know what to do, I studied Italian linguistics, and I specialized in Italian, English, and Hungarian proverbs containing the word dog and horse. So you can imagine the kind of transferable skills I brought to the UK. As soon as I finished, pretty much nothing. Nobody cared about it. But after 3 years, I went to uni and I got a master's in international management. And that was more exciting because I specialized in Eastern and Western European joint ventures. But my research showed that the gap between the two generations in Hungary was much bigger than the gap between the new generation and the Western Europeans, which didn't make sense because it went against everything that we learned about what all the academics claimed, that culture is country-specific and stable. And I thought, no, look at the numbers. That's not true at all. But you know exactly who are you to question the big boys? They've been around for 40, 50 years. That's not polite. So I submitted it. I got a good grade and I left it. I started my own company, which was a restaurant booking site. You book a table, we get the money. That was the business model, but it was more exciting than that. So we started with 35 restaurants here in Brighton, and in 1 year we had 5,500 all over the UK, became the fastest growing restaurant listing, and it turned into a joint venture with a software company. On paper, everything made sense. We were getting the results. In real life, I couldn't stand the other CEO who was French. So we got to the point where we had to get out of the business. It wasn't pretty at all. But that's when I started my research, because I didn't understand how come that was the exact topic of my dissertation. I had years of experience. The department where I studied is #1 in the world in its category. How come I couldn't put that theory into practice? So I got certified in a lot of different things, and I worked with the people who created the intercultural field and the psychometric field, because I didn't know what happened. It didn't make sense. And my assumption was that if all of these models are or were correct, there must be a huge overlapping part. And that's what I'm looking for. The structure beneath the surface, the blueprint of why people think and behave differently. Not the decoration on top, that's important as well, but I'm sure there is a blueprint. So this webinar is about those insights. So it's not about convincing you, it's about sharing the insights. The more you know, the better decision you can make for yourself, for your business, and for your clients. So it's not just a good idea, it's innovative and also proven. So now we have more than 160 licensed partners in 42 countries. We work with the European Parliament, Fortune 500 companies, 16 universities, and a lot of other companies as well, who are committed to turning their differences into synergy instead of painful liability. So creating a visibly diverse group is relatively easy. Turning it into a high-performing team is challenging. And I think just this one sentence sums up our field, to be honest. But let's do something else. A poll. Do you feel that you're a statistically average individual of the country where you grew up? So I'm going to launch the poll, and you have two options. Yes, I'm like a fish in water. No, but I know how to act like one. So how average are you? We have 60%, 73, a few more, 75. How average are you? Or do you feel? Anyone else? We've got 79%. It sounds like an auction slowly, but no, that's it. 83, last one, ending now. Ending. So as you can see, 70% of the people said no, but I know how to act like that. And only 30% feel that they are statistically average. And that's a really good insight. So when you mention the word culture, this is what most people think about. The 5 do's and don'ts in different countries. And yes, that's important, the statistically average values and beliefs. But the problem is that more than 80% of cultural differences exist within countries, not between them. So when you move to a country, yes, you have to learn about what is normal, what people are used to. But as soon as your success depends on how well you understand those individuals. If they are your partners, your clients, or your boss, they can be truly misleading. Because we all belong to 15 or 20 culture groups at the same time. Country of origin is one of them. According to another research, where they compared 17 different culture groups, then the bottom three, as they said, the poorest container of culture were country of origin, gender, and generation. Meaning that based on these categories, you cannot predict an individual's values and beliefs. Even the horoscope is more accurate than that. And that's not even a joke. What people are used to, how they have to behave, yes, that would be correct. But pretending that we understand those people, we know that those are their values, that has nothing to do with science. So if you go even deeper, you find different personality types with completely opposing preferences. As you can see, the visible layer diversity is insanely complex. And that's why we focus on cognitive diversity, the only layer that has proven benefit in terms of performance, the way people think, the immune system of the teams. And I'm going to show you that. So when you see things like that, pretending that you can create high-performing teams, that's not exactly true. If you talk about countries and the difference between them, especially when the people are there, yes, it makes sense. But creating a high-performing team based on where people are from, that has not much to do with science. Even now, 70% of the people feel that they are not statistically average. They are different. So do you think that other people are the same? No, really. Culture is not who we are, it's what we are used to. There's a big difference there. Of course, it shapes us, but that's not us. It's part of us. So cognitive diversity is the difficult part. What happens when somebody disagrees with you? That's the tricky part. And that's why we like common sense. We like people who agree with us. So imagine that you have a really complicated problem like this one. Tom is the boss, and Tom employs really smart people like Emma, Jerry, Lisa, and Max. But Tom doesn't know about homophilic diversity, which sounds like a disease, but it just means that we like and trust people who are similar to us, especially inside. You know, people who have common sense. So a team can be individually really smart, but collectively blind. And again, it's not just a theory. We have plenty of case studies. There was 10 senior leaders from 8 different countries. So on the surface, really diverse. You could take a picture, you can post it, and you can use the country-specific approach to highlight the gap that doesn't even exist on individual level. But if you look at the global DISC results, the cognitive diversity index was 22%, meaning that if you look at the sliding scales as a range of perspectives, approaches to problems and opportunities, only 22% is covered. So you have all the 10 people within this range. But it also makes sense. Why would you employ somebody who annoys you? Do you need that hassle in your life? No. So we end up with people like us. The brain doesn't like diversity. That's the starting point, because diversity means unpredictability. And that is the last thing that the brain wants. So you can have a really smart team. They can agree, but the blind spot is huge. Can they make the best decision? Since the year 2000, more than 50% of Fortune 500 companies disappeared. Size is not the guarantee for anything. It's about seeing the same situation from different perspectives so you can make better decisions. And that is the definition of uncommon mindset. That's another example. That was 5 people, 1 leader and 4 employees. And they were really proud of their diversity. They can be and they should be. But if you look at the cognitive layer, they're not that different, 42%. But here's the funny thing. When you compare the leader with the group average, it turned out that he managed to attract people like himself from all over the world. Of course, they hit it off. Cognitive diversity is difficult. What happens when somebody disagrees with you? To me, that is the dividing line between just simple diversity and inclusion. Inclusion is the difficult part. That's another case study. That was a big German company. They employed a lot of Brazilian engineers. So we had to create a high-performing team. And yes, of course, we can highlight the differences between Brazil and Germany, which is huge. But if you look at the cognitive layer, so if you look at the black little person and then the red one, then it turns out that the Brazilian engineers were much more German inside than most Germans. They left Brazil because it was too messy for them. And that's the reason why those were the worst container of culture: gender, generation, and country of origin. Because that's not up to you. But even if you are completely different, you learn how to navigate efficiently in that environment. But when you choose a profession, you choose a hobby, you choose to move somewhere, then ideally choose an environment where your personal preferences are closer to what is normal around you. So we could have highlighted the differences to widen the gap. Instead of that, we built a common ground where they learned how to make the most of their differences. And here's something comforting: that you don't understand men or women, it's not your fault, because they're so different, as if they were from a different planet. And this guy sold 50 million copies because people need this confirmation. It's not my fault. True, but it's not. So that was one of our courses. I just put all the women in one group, all the men in another one, and I compared them as groups. It turned out they are not that different at all. Then I thought, let's try something else. Millennials and baby boomers within the same group. Baby boomers, millennials, they were not that different. Often the expectations are different, or maybe the best practices that we use. But let's deal with facts, and then we can find better solutions. So going back to the problem, Tom is still the boss. Now he knows that he has to employ smart people who also think differently. So we have a fantastic team, cognitively diverse and also smart. But that is just the potential for success or disaster, because that just means that you have people who think and behave differently. It can be good, it can be bad. You still have to make it work. But there's another option, that Tom is not really a good boss because he's too dominant. So whatever Tom says goes. So people quickly learn there's no point in coming up with ideas, don't contradict. People learn how to conform to the norms. And that's how you lose the power of diversity. And that's how people burn out and they become disengaged. And you saw the statistics in the very beginning. Again, this is not just theory. 90% of business is interaction between people who think and behave differently. And this is the research that was done by the 3 Circle partners in the US. They wanted to understand, how come you put really smart people in a team? You hope to create synergy by combining their skills, but in real life, this is not what happens. So how much potential is lost? And we like numbers. So they gave an individual assessment to everyone in the team. They scored them individually, and then they had to submit one collectively. What you see here, the blue number, that's the team result. The green one is the best possible individual score. As you can see, there's a massive gap. So they had the right answer, but didn't make it to the team one. So they repeated it hundreds of times, and the average gap was 79%. That's how much potential is lost in a team. Is it good for the business? You see, this is a completely different research coming up with a very similar number. Like in the beginning, 60 to 80% of all problems stem from the lack of understanding of why people think and behave differently. Different research, same result. What's the problem with that? This is something that we need to learn, but this is not criticism at all. It's the exact opposite. Because you can show your clients that, look, you have this potential, you have that money left on the table, and we can help you unlock it by giving you the blueprint of why people think and behave differently. It's not based on good intention and common sense. So why is it important to measure instead of guessing? So when you take an assessment, you learn about your preference, which is really stable. And most people have 5 to 10% flexibility. That's our comfort zone. That's how the brain was designed. Because it's 2% of our body weight, but uses more than 20% of the energy. So it's designed to find people with common sense. It's designed to keep you in your comfort zone and create habits. But if you look at the sliding scale, there's a range of communication styles, and you are in this situation, then you would have to flex too much, which might be too tiring, or you just react instead of responding. And you don't get the best result. What can we do? Well, technically, we can change your preferences, but there's nothing wrong with you, so that's not the point. What we want instead is to expand your comfort zone. It's you, but an upgraded version, because if something is rigid, it breaks. That's the problem. Often people get an assessment, They run around that I'm still yellow, I'm still red. So what? And what happens after that? What do you do about that? And knowing that is great. But even a company has a corporate comfort zone. That is the behavior that is expected and rewarded. You can push the boundaries, maybe it's accepted, maybe it's tolerated, and the rest is punished. So here's the question. How big is the mindset gap between you, what is natural to you, and what is normal around you? That matters. I can ask a different question. How much do you have to pretend in order to be accepted? It's more painful. This can be your own family, your gender, generation, company, country. In every single cultural group, there is a normal behavior that most people conform to. And if you don't, there are consequences. And even in this group, 70% of the people are not statistically average. That means that you have to flex a little bit, or even more. That's why we have to measure these things. Guessing is not an option. The second invisible force is psychological safety. It's a really hot topic recently. It's been around for decades and decades, but I think it's gaining more momentum now. So we know that the #1 trait of high-performing teams is psychological safety. It's not even about intelligence. It's about the quality of interaction within and between people. Psychological safety is needed. So you're not going to be punished if you make a mistake or if you come up with a weird idea. And that is easier to say. If you look at the McKinsey report, 70% of the people know, the leaders, that it is important, but only 26% of them know how to do it. There's a huge gap. We know it's important. We know it's needed. How do you do that? How can you improve something if you don't know how to measure it? And the third invisible force is motivation. Yes, you can feel psychologically safe, but if you're not motivated, not much is going to happen. So it's the desire to learn, contribute, and get things done. And here, I like talking about Daniel Pink's research, because I think that is one of the most up-to-date researches. So he talks about the evolution of motivation. Motivation 1.0 was very primal. Let's make babies and stay alive. And, that was enough for a while. But then when we had to interact with other people as well, then the carrot and the stick, the pain and pleasure principle, the extrinsic motivators became really important. And that works. But the problem is that we can adapt to anything. So you have to reward or punish people even more to get the same result. And that is not ideal when it's about collaboration, creativity, and synergy. That's why we had to upgrade it to motivation 3.0. That is coming from inside, the intrinsic motivators. When you tap into these, that's when people are motivated, engaged. But that can be very different from your version. And we can see this, for example, in leadership as well. The old school leadership style, push people, punish them, it's going to be good. As opposed to, let's step into the intrinsic ones. But for that, you have to get to know people, because if you don't know what drives them, how can you create that motivating environment around them? That's not easy. We are not the same, but we are predictably different. So let's say that you have a cognitively diverse, smart team. Fantastic. But how do you know if they feel safe and motivated enough to innovate and collaborate? How can you optimize something without measuring and visualizing it? There's a lot of discussion about inclusion, psychological safety, but when you ask, how do you measure it so we can precisely and intentionally address the problems, not much comes back sometimes. So this is where growth 1.0 is important. So when you score high on motivation and psychological safety, then you are in the growth zone. If you don't, then not much happens there. The family zone is safe, but not motivated. You're not going to fire your kids if they are lazy. So it's safe, but in a business, we need motivation. You have to step up and you have to be active, but you have to feel safe. So that is the right combination. Evolution happens under pressure. So that was a case study that was one of our clients. So statistically, as a team, they were in the growth zone. They are not in the upper 25%, the drive, but still, it's not too bad. They could pat themselves on the back. But the problem is that sometimes numbers can lie or they can hide the truth. So immediately I can see that psychological safety is 64%, motivation 66%. and the combination is 65, which is not too bad. But if you look at the tension score, 73 and 65, that shows how polarized a team is. So when you break it down, you can see the individuals. So statistically, great. But there is one person in the apathy zone and one in the anxiety zone. So now if you think about the interaction among these people, then you can imagine that it's not ideal. And we know that if you have only 1 or 2 people, outliers, then it can affect performance by 30 or 40%. That's a lot. So that's why we have to be able to measure it. So it's not about hunting down these people, because sometimes that's the initial reaction, but it's about finding out why some people feel like that, so we can address those issues. At this point, we don't know that, but we can break it down. We can break down psychological safety and motivational drivers into 4 subcategories each, so we can find out where the problem is, how serious it is, and we can work with the people to find out what that is exactly. Because maybe there was just a misunderstanding between 2 people. Maybe there is a bad leader. Maybe something is going on in their personal life. We don't know that. But instead of shaming companies into inclusion, let's find out what the real problem is, so we can deal with facts. But the highest level of growth happens in a psychologically safe, motivated, and cognitively diverse environment. So that would be growth 2.0. That's why you saw the percentage, the growth zones percentage on the previous slide. Now you add cognitive diversity to it, and we can see where the team is. And to be honest, most of the teams are here somewhere in tunnel vision, which is great because they can make money, but at what cost? And that's not where innovation happens. So let's see how they affect the 4 stages of growth. So stage 1 is growth. This is when you score high on all the 3 invisible forces. That's where the magic happens, you know, like Netflix. They employ the best of the best. They pay them more than the average. They give them the freedom. And the biggest mistake they can make is when they don't risk, when they don't learn from a mistake, and they are growing quickly. Now they are struggling a little bit, but they were doing pretty well so far. Time bomb, that is stage 2. And it sounds nasty because it is, because if there's a time bomb somewhere, if you don't notice it, then it can go off later on. If you find it, you can diffuse it. So time bomb is when you score low on one of the 3 invisible forces. So if you are lacking cognitive diversity, then the team has a tunnel vision, a huge blind spot. If you are lacking motivation, then yes, it's nice, but it's going to lead to stagnation. And if you are lacking psychological safety, then a lot of different thinking people are going to burn out. That leads to anxiety. One example, Volkswagen, the Dieselgate. 2015, they implemented the defeat devices in more than 500,000 cars. It turned out it's much more than that since then, because they had to pass the emission test in the US. It wasn't one mistake. It was a lot. They had to deliver the numbers, but people were afraid of speaking up, and now it's costing them a lot of money. It wasn't one mistake. It was down to culture. Decline. This is stage 3. This is when you scored low on 2 of the invisible forces. So if you have only motivation, that's pretty much a rat race. Let's hurry up until we collapse. If you have only cognitive diversity but nothing else, that's confusing. That leads to chaos. And if you have only psychological safety, then probably it's going to lead to dissolution. And again, size is not a guarantee for anything. Let's think about Kodak. You know, in 68, they had 80% of the market. They were huge. But when in 75, digital camera was invented, they thought, nah, we are too big. Nobody likes digital camera. People like the real ones. And the customer said, no, actually we do, because it's cheaper and better quality. And then Fuji came, and they thought, nah, the clients are going to buy American. They are loyal. They would never buy Japanese. And clients said, yeah, actually, yeah, we do. So by the time Kodak woke up, it was way too late. And now I think they are getting into cryptocurrency, but they are struggling now. They used to be big, not anymore. And stage 4 is not a surprise, but this is when you score low on all 3 of them. And it's kind of self-explanatory. game over. And one of the examples is the famous Blockbuster. They were huge in the US. And for example, when in 2000, Netflix approached them and they wanted to partner with them, then they said, no, little startup, how dare you? We are too big. And in 2004, they realized that, wait, Netflix is a competition now. We should do something about it. At that point, they had two options. Let's cancel the late fees. Yeah, but that would cost $200 million. It's not a good idea. Then we could build a digital platform. The cost would be $200 million. No, we don't do that. Indeed, they sacked the CEO because he was rocking the boat too much. In 2010, they filed for bankruptcy with $1 billion in debt. And Netflix is Fortune 115, or 115 today. So the world is changing. Size is not a guarantee for anything. So when you can show this kind of clarity to a team, to a company, then they can make an informed decision. Just because you don't know about something, it doesn't mean that it's not affecting you, that the damage is not being done. That's the issue with that. And that's why guessing is not an option when it's about people. So going back to the growth, why is it important? Because this is time bomb. You don't know about it. It's very unlikely. You might have it. If you find it, you diffuse it. If you don't, well, we know where it leads to. But if you do, then you can grow. And this is what we do with corporate partners. Sometimes they think that, look, this is an additional tool, we have enough. Well, it's not. You can replace 4 or 5 different models as well. You don't need international models, psychometric assessment, employee engagement surveys, because it's technically included in a very practical way. It's also a diagnostic tool. It's about the 3 invisible forces that make or break a team. I mean, when it comes to D&I, it's a very popular topic, but I think there are 4 levels to it. The lowest level is when there isn't any diversity. Similar looks, similar thoughts. Level 2 is when you have different looks and similar thoughts. You saw some case studies for this. Level 3, when you have some kind of cognitive diversity, but it's inconsistent. And the highest level of growth happens in a psychologically safe, motivated, and cognitively diverse, inclusive culture. The interesting thing is that lots of clients believe that they are here. In reality, they are level 2. Lots of different looking people who think the same way, or who have to think the same way. Otherwise, they are in trouble. So that is the approach that we are using. It's data-driven, high-performing team coaching or organizational development. First, you have to measure things. Then you visualize it so they know what it means. Most of the time, when you talk about culture, mindset, and things like that, then the clients think, yeah, it's nice, but it's a fluffy topic. If you cannot hold something in your hand, if you don't have a number to it, if you don't know if you are making progress or you're not, it's too easy to ignore it. That's the problem with that. Then we have the results, then we can optimize them together, and then we can grow. There is no shortcut. Hoping for the best is not the best strategy. And you saw the statistics. Companies spend a fortune on the same solutions, and they completely ignore the fact that the world completely changed and new challenges require new solutions. So it's almost like putting your team or your company in a scan, and then we can see the details. We don't know exactly what it is, but we work with you to find out what it is. Because statistically, maybe your company is great or your team, but it's almost like finding cancer in your body. If you find it in time, you can do something about it. If you don't, it's going to spread. And especially now, because of the Great Resignation, this topic is even more important than before. And that's one thing that people are resigning. But maybe there's another stage where people don't even apply for a job because they can make money on TikTok and YouTube and things like that. Then there's going to be a problem. So how do you improve your own company culture? How do you future-proof your own business and your clients' future? That's the real question. So this is what we do. And obviously, if something is written down, then it must be true. So it's also published in a book. We won several awards, ICF accredited, and it is endorsed by the leading experts in the world as well. So finding something that is innovative, but also proven, that's very difficult. This is one of those. There are a lot of solutions that are packaged nicely, but they are based on very old ideas. So the question is, how can we make it more practical and uncomplicated? Because if something is too complex, people are not going to use it. And that's what I noticed in the training industry as well. It's very disconnected. People have 5, 6, 7, 8 different models to manage and serve people. So they feel that there is a kind of connection or something, but because the different models use different colors, metaphors, numbers, it's confusing. This is a fully integrated system using the same vocabulary, the same frame of reference when you talk about one person, a couple, a department, a company, even a country. It doesn't get more consistent and uncomplicated than that. Easy? No. But what's the alternative?